Time now for the Gillette performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
So every Monday morning we kick the show off with the performance rankings. This is the most important thing that anybody who has been achieving anything on any field globally can win on a Monday morning right here on OTB AM. But it's your chance to win as well, because we're going to give you the chance to win a Gillette starter pack. All you got to do is send us in your suggestions for the performance rankings on OTB AM. And at the end of the show, we will announce a winner. So who should make Monday's performance rankings? We want to know the good, the bad, and the grand, the meh. So we're going to start with the red. Who's in the bad? Fairly obvious stuff from this, I think, from the weekend. Biggest game in world football, biggest moment to show that yes, all the billions and billions of money that we have had pumped into this company, essentially at the petrol tank, has been worthwhile. But no, it has not been worthwhile. Manchester City, you are in the red this morning.
Well, both petrol tanks can't be winners on the day, it turns out. So Chelsea certainly will feel that it was all worthwhile. Manchester City, not so. That's what happens when there can only be one winner. And maybe that will prove costly when a number of different states invest in football and realise actually we can't have it every single year. Manchester City realising that at the moment. They are first up in the red this morning. A number of different things that we can get into here about why this was such a bad evening for Manchester City. On a statistical level, the fact that they posted their worst expected goals tally of the entire season would explain why they put in such a bad performance. And yet, most of the discourse in the aftermath of the game was why Manchester City elected to play without Fernandinho and Rodri. This old chestnut of Pep Guardiola potentially putting too much thought into a big game has come up, and maybe not enough actually about understanding why he arrived at the decisions that he arrived at. We had some very strong recent evidence that this might happen in this game, that Chelsea would do one on Manchester City, because they did it twice already in the FA Cup semi-final and in the Premier League. Two games which may not have seemed important at the time, but they were two competitive football games involving Manchester City. Pep Guardiola does not like to lose, and he would have seen both of those games as proper testing grounds, not some sort of cloak to shield what he was going to try and do at the weekend, proper testing grounds. So Pep Guardiola had clearly seen what he had done in those two games and decided to not do that thing again, because of course he had lost both of those games. If you look at the Premier League game between the sides, Rodri started in that game, and if you look at the FA Cup game between the sides, Fernandinho and Rodri both started that game. So maybe that explains why he went without both of them at the weekend. And essentially, as I say, the reason why they lost the game might not be because of the absence of those two players, but because they didn't post a high enough XG or create enough chances, work Edouard Mendy enough.
But why did they not create enough chances? Why did they not have a higher XG? It's because the team was completely unbalanced and they hadn't tried this before. They had no frame of reference.
Yeah, like once this season, before Saturday night, was when they played a game without either Rodri or Fernandinho, and I thought Fernandinho was brilliant against Paris Saint-Germain in the leg he did play, and that sort of edge that he brings to proceedings goes beyond the statistical line that you're going to see on the pitch. It winds up the opposition, it creates more tension than the opposition would want in certain areas, and maybe there's a material case to be made that his anticipation is N'Golo Kante-like, and he can stop that pass from Mason Mount through to Kai Havertz, and maybe it stays 0-0, and it doesn't matter what Manchester City are posting XG-wise, because they can take the game to extra time then. 100% see that point, but I'm just trying to understand why Pep made that decision, because sitting there on Saturday, you're like, okay, this is clearly not the right decision, and then very quickly you realise that you're not Pep Guardiola, and he's clearly put a lot of thought into this and has something going on in his brain that has made him think that this was the right decision. So I'm just trying to understand why he arrived at this point.
There's a ghost in his brain. There's like a yawning chasm in his soul into which he needs to fill something that is him, that is his and his alone, some creation. Because he was so praised for the quality of the football that Barcelona team played, he is seeking that similar spectral existence. It's a different plane from merely winning a football match that you and me would be happy with, and that's why we're obviously nowhere near that level of...
That's the only reason.
Like, what else is it? What else is this? Like, what could, when you've got a team that is the best team in Europe, that is playing really well, that is in really excellent form, why would you go away from that, which you know works?
Because he got spooked by what had happened in the previous 2 games.
But did he not play centre forward in those 2 games as well? I mean, I don't have those 2 team sheets in front of me, but everybody, certainly in the analysis that we've done, he played a centre forward in both of those games, and so therefore, like, I think Jesus played in both those games.
He did.
So, and as a number 9, and the whole thing was like, let's see the team without the number 9 play, where you've got your false 9, but you've got your defensive midfielder there, and as you talk about, setting the tone, particularly against a team who are going to be nervous. Okay, so in N'Golo Kante, they have somebody who has literally played in all the biggest games in the world and who knows exactly what it's like to be at this level. So he wasn't going to be nervous. But there were a lot of other players in that team who are very young and so therefore are looking around. And if somebody kicks N'Golo Kante early on, damages him somehow, and that's your Fernandinho, and it's like there's a bit of a battle going on, and suddenly he's and I don't know. It just seemed to me like there was like fairly obvious pre-match. Has he done it again? Yes, he's done it again. And it's not the first time he's done it, and it's not the second time he's done it in big European games where you're like, just pick your best team. Your players are the best. Just back your players in a way. Like Tuchel's getting all this credit for like, oh, everybody knew exactly what they were supposed to do. It's like, well, I mean, yeah, but they also they rode their luck quite a bit. There were some last minute. Last gasp tackles and challenges that prevented goals, and that's what you need to do to win these big games when you are what looks like an inferior team. But anyway, yeah, definitely in the red for me, and some of the players too. I don't think the players, you know, the stuff about the formations is important. I absolutely accept that, and it created chances and it gave Chelsea pockets of space because they hadn't worked on it that much, but they're still some of the best players in the world, and they did not perform to their level.
No, they didn't.
It's a combination thing here.
It is. I just feel that with a different selection of players, there would have been a similar lack of output to a degree. I wouldn't be surprised if we were sitting here this morning looking at a similar result despite Fernandinho having started and saying
that's interesting.
His energy maybe couldn't match Mason Mount's.
In which case it's the players on City's responsibility to win the game, and you feel like they didn't do it anyway.
I think so. Like that's certainly where I think Saturday night, as you say, you look at the team sheet, you're like, right, there's your narrative straight away. No matter what way this goes, we can essentially blame or praise Pep Guardiola for this. That's it sorted. And then you actually see the game materialise and I guess different form lines from specific players manifest themselves, and it just seems that narrative has been stuck with in the aftermath of the game. I'm not saying it's not true, and I'm not saying that Pep Guardiola got his team right. I just think that the players do have to take a good bit of the responsibility as well. Now, of course, there were like terrible moments of luck from Manchester City's perspective. Like their best player broke his face. Like that is not a great situation to be in in any final. Now, in fairness, it was deep into the game, and there was evidence at that point that Chelsea had done one on Manchester City again, or had at least got the upper hand to a point. There was also a situation where late in the game, Kyle Walker turns into Rory Delap, and you're like, what has happened to the calm, composed, death by a thousand cuts nature to this Manchester City team? And you do come away from it thinking that this is a team that, of course, will have the possibility of dominating the Premier League again next season. But when Pep Guardiola is faced with a big Champions League final again in 12 months' time, potentially, do you back him to do something similar? Do you back these players to do something similar? This has become a mountain at this point.
Well, all the papers, and we'll talk about this in the Chelsea section, are talking about the investment that's coming, the next 200 million that Chelsea are going to be able to spend, because they'll have the annual amount of money that Abramovich is clearly going to be invested in spending, and then all the extra money that they're going to be able to raise from selling those players who are fringe players in the squad or who are already out on loan. So that squad is going to get significantly better. And so, say for example, they had a striker in that first half, they could have been 2 or 3-0 up, and some of those young players are going to flower into truly world-class players. Like Reece James is as good as Trent Alexander-Arnold was, it looks like, at that stage of his career. Sorry, they're probably about the same age, but in terms of the amount of games that he played for the first team, he was sensational the other night. Mason Mount, obviously still growing into his role and understanding what the game is because he's so young, but clearly brilliant. You've got Havertz, who I do think will be a success at that stage, and then there's 4 or 5 others who you could kind of factor into there as well. Even Billy Gilmore, who's like dressing around or jumping around the changing room afterwards, going, "I could get in this team." Like, you know.
Well, if you go to, like, I know we'll get to Chelsea in a moment, but like the players that they didn't use at the weekend, like Hakim Ziyech is one that certainly sticks off the substitutes list to me because he was so good in that FA Cup semi-final against Manchester City, like, which for me is a significant moment in this season where we were like, hold on a minute, is this actually going to be this great modern rivalry, especially in the context of there being a Champions League final coming down the tracks? And as it turned out, it absolutely was. Now, they replaced Ziyech and had enough threat down that left-hand side, as it turned out, to destroy Manchester City on Saturday night on a number of occasions as well. But these are the sort of players that will step up for Chelsea potentially next season, will be completely biting at the heels of players who are in that starting 11. You've got Callum Hudson-Odoi in there, Billy Gilmore, as you mentioned, Marcus Alonso didn't play, Zuma's in there, Giroud's in there. Like, it's a brilliant squad. They're going to strengthen as well. And like, there will always be this lingering fear that Roman Abramovich will do something crazy if things just dip a little bit next season. But there's also this maybe a case to be made more than ever that there is a manager here now that Chelsea might forgive for a poor start to a season if it does happen.
This is not Roberto Di Matteo.
Exactly. It's a far different standard of manager and a far different reputation and far more charisma. And I presume, well, maybe not far more charisma, but... Really? Okay, we can go there. I'm just thinking about poor old Roberto.
Okay. It's a weird kind of charisma that Tuchel has. If you tell me a bit more about your man love for Thomas Tuchel there, Owen. This is an interesting little...
Well, I mean, he's just... I don't know.
Wow, so charismatic. That's not... I've never heard anybody say that about Tuchel.
Really?
Yeah. I wouldn't call it charisma, would you?
I don't know. Maybe it's the wrong. Maybe it's the wrong turn of phrase. But like he's not Jurgen Klopp charisma. That's for sure. But there is a sort of I don't know. There's a lovable nerdiness to him, and you can just see.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's communicated in quite a charismatic way. I think.
Okay. He's a good communicator. He's the geek's geek.
Yeah, I think he's more than just a good communicator. I think he has to have some level of inspiration about him, right? I think which can only come from a level of charisma in that dressing room.
I don't know. I think he might just be a grown-up. He might just really understand football and be able to communicate that. Like, that's the first thing that strikes me. It's like, you guys are going to defend, you're going to play midfield, and you're going to attack, and this is how we're going to do it. And very detail-oriented when he's talking to the players, which is, it seems, the complete opposite of Frank Lampard and his, like, individual errors, you know? Individual errors costing this team a lot. It did cost the team a lot. It cost the team a league this year that they could have given us a title race if they'd had Thomas Tuchel in. Anyway, look, let's not get into the wormhole of whether or not Thomas Tuchel is charismatic.
It's a good poll. Is Thomas Tuchel charismatic? Yes or no? Vote now or forever hold your silence. Next up in the red is UEFA. Like, what a Champions League we've had. Once again, it's almost just become normalised at this point. Even with the absence of fans up until the final, it was still probably better than most of the football we watched all season.
So let me set the context for this. So we're coming off a really good Champions League final where there was attacking play, vibrancy. It wasn't the Liverpool Spurs Champions League final. Everybody thought was really boring, unless you're a Liverpool fan. The neutrals were like, oh, crap game. But this game, I don't think any neutral saw was a crap game. So they've just come off the back of that. They've saved football by slashing the dream of the European Super League from the super clubs. Why are you putting them in the red?
Because they are tinkering with something that is near perfection. As we're going to get into here a little bit in the amber, there are so many sporting structures that are so obviously flawed. Through no fault of the sporting organisation's own, sometimes it's just tradition gets in the way of, I guess, progressiveness and actually common sense on a number of occasions. UEFA, though, have this golden egg, which is the Champions League, which is commercially successful beyond the point of belief, I'd imagine, if you went back in time and told UEFA chiefs 50 years ago that this is what it would become. And that is also ridiculously enjoyable, that all these teams come together, treat it more importantly than their domestic leagues in some occasions, the best players in the world, all in this, and in a format that just works, that creates enough drama, with the exception of the group stage, but we'll get over that. It is it is as near perfection as a competition as UEFA are ever going to have. And here they are tearing it up, about to install a Swiss system in a couple of years. And away goals, sure. This really important moment of all of our childhoods being snatched away from us just like that. I mean, maybe it will make for a better spectacle, but what is rare is wonderful is what I would always say when it comes to extra time and penalties, and away goals always made those two things way more of a rarity. It also made far more ties a complete roller coaster, where like you look at Lucas Moura's goal, for example, against Ajax, turning certain defeat into progression into the next round, into the Champions League final. That like the sort of superpower of a away goal is now going to be completely obsolete. And maybe I'm just a little bit wistful, and maybe this will actually be a good thing, because there are certain times when, especially there's an underdog who's trying to fight back and they're up against an away goal from a better team, and you're like, oh, I'd love a bit of extra time here. But I think that's actually just short-termism. I think over the passage of time, we actually remember the great away goals moments as much as we remember a penalty shootout or extra times. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think that too much messing around, too much changing what is actually working very well. And in our next slot, I think you're wrong not to blame the organisation, because the organisation needs to show leadership. In this instance, they're not showing leadership. I don't know what Arsene Wenger's point was when he was saying that this will lead to more attacking football. I don't really understand. And look, he obviously knows more about preparing teams for away matches, but why would you bother attacking if you're an inferior side against a better team away from home? There's literally no point. You park that bus. You park that bus for 90 minutes, for 120 minutes, and you get your draw, you get your 0-0, you get your penalties if it's the second leg. Like, the whole notion as well that, oh, goals count more, shouldn't count more. It's the same for both sides. In two legs, you have 90 minutes on both sides. Maybe what you do then is you stop away goals counting in extra time. I could be down with that little tweak, but maybe it's not fair. And but who cares? is sort of the way I've been thinking about it the last couple of days. Is that I like this thing, and I think a lot of people like this thing, and it was kind of fun. And is that a reason enough to keep it? Probably not. Maybe fairness is more important. But like the away goals has been slowly eroded from the League Cup. But
we're getting out of time. The producer's getting antsy.
Let's move on to the amber, which is GAA structures. The reason why it's an amber is that there's a lot of green shoots coming from the GAA structures so far this summer, where we have what I think is the greatest competition in intercounty football being halved, which makes it even more chaotic, more turbulent. Then you throw it into brilliant conditions right in the middle of summer. Then you throw it right on the heels, well, the opposite of the heels, right in the toes of the championship this year, which means there's no room for messing, no room for keeping your cards close to your chest. Everybody's fit, everybody's raring to go. And we've just had this explosion of brilliant football over the last few weeks. We've spoken quite a bit on the show about the Ulster teams maybe playing ball in a more attractive manner. But really, is it actually just down to the fact that the conditions are better, they're playing teams of a similar standard, the stakes seem higher, and preparations are nigh for the biggest competition of all, which is the championship in just a few weeks' time. This has led to this brilliant few weeks of football. On the downside, what we have is the realisation that we will go back to normal next year, or something that resembles 2020-2019, again, awaiting what happens in Congress later on this year. And then on top of that, we have this story this morning around venues. Angry Joy Stables home game for Monaghan, a joke, for example, reads the front of the Irish Independent sports section. Whenever we stumble upon something good, there is always this sense that something is not quite right with it, or something wrong is going to happen eventually. No good things in the GAA can ever be for real, is the takeaway from this year. But maybe not. Maybe things change down the line. Maybe this will become a blueprint for the future of the GAA. What we're seeing right now should be the championship. This should feed in some shape or form into the destination of Sam Maguire in any given year, in my opinion.
So just explain that. You want the best teams playing against each other in summer, irrespective of what province they're from.
Correct, absolutely. And if the provincial championships ends up being the league, aka the curtain raiser, months out from the championship, then so be it. Everybody can have their cake. But the importance of the provincial championship, which is now going to put the brakes on the excitement for a few weeks after 2 weeks' time, that's just going to be a complete buzzkill for everybody. Again, speaking selfishly here, I'm just speaking from a fan's point of view who wants to see good football. But I think a lot of people may feel that as well, that really this is kind of putting an excellent competition first, the best competition first, then the worst competition second, and then the all-right competition last, which is the All-Ireland series of the Championship. It should be the complete opposite way, where the best competition comes last, when the players are at their fittest and when the stakes are at their highest.
Okay, very quickly, the last two.
Brentford, going back up, they finally won their playoff final after losing to Fulham last year. I mean, I think people are very familiar with the Brentford story at this point. It's going to be like themselves and Norwich coming up is really exciting from a Premier League standpoint, because it feels that those two teams have got promoted in a really effective way, that they have a sustainable model. Norwich's sustainability probably comes from the fact that they've been relegated a number of times and are now playing a really attractive brand of football. Brentford's sustainability comes from, obviously, their massive reliance on analytics over the past few years. People don't need to be told about this. Everybody knows the story inside out. But you look through some of the players that they've sold over the last few years, like last summer alone, Ollie Watkins for a 30 million fee and Saeed Benrahma for a 20 million pound fee. They are making proper cash off proper scouting, and you'd imagine that the players they'll start scouting from next season will be better, and the money they'll start raking in will be even bigger, which will allow them to put a foothold on the bottom of the Premier League and potentially stay up. Really excited to see them in the Premier League, and they were excellent on Saturday. Ivan Toney is an outstanding player, and if you're a supporter of a certain Premier League club, part of you might have wanted Brentford to lose the game so that Ivan Toney could perhaps be signed by our Premier League team, but he's going to have to stay with Brentford, and they're going to have a hell of a shot at staying up next season. All
right, so Brentford are in green at the weekend, also Chelsea in green at the weekend, but we're going to talk about Chelsea in just a moment with Mark Lawrenson. That is this week's Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.